Hey everybody, welcome to episode 43 of the Hey Kerwin Show.
First question.
Hey, first of all, do you like my gladiator haircut? Anyway.
I'll put him next to your face, we'll see.
Oh God.
Hillarimarshall.
Hey Hillary.
What advice do you have around launching a podcast? Can I use some of the same content I'm using in other spaces? Should there be a guest?
Whoa, where are you pointing that camera, Matty?
I'm just pointing it at the podcast.
Oh, wow, okay. Funny you should mention that. We actually are in the midst of recording some podcasts today. We actually have a how to launch a podcast checklist. It's actually a, what do you call it? Ebook, white paper. So what we'll do is we'll throw the link up right here. Ching! Basically takes you through the whole process. But my advice is, in order to launch a podcast, you want to start thinking about, first of all, who your target audience is. Because ultimately you want to be connecting a message with the market. And you want to be making sure that whoever your current market is, that there's a level of interest from your current market with the existing podcast. Now I'm going to assume that Hillary, you're already in business in some way, shape or form. And if you are, you want to be making sure ideally that those two connect. Otherwise you're going to be having to build a completely different brand with a completely different audience to one that you've already got, which means you're going to have to do twice as much work. Now there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do, but it is something that you do need to consider. Because ideally, whether you're, launching a podcast or a new product, the closer it is to what it is that you do, the more aligned it will be with the current market, and the less work and the more you'll have to do, but the more leverage you can get from the work that you've already done. There's nothing worse than having to start over from scratch, because that's where all the work is. But the second thing I'd advise you to do is make sure you get a very strong list of guests for your launch sequence. So the first 7 days, like I think when we first launched our podcast, I think we launched, 7 podcasts in 7 days? Yeah. And we basically had filmed at this point, I think about 40 or 50 podcasts. So we had a nice big can of dog food and we could, evenly distribute the food out. But what we did is we got the best chunks and we put them out in the can first. That's terrible. But you get my point. I think one of the mistakes that people make when they launch a podcast is as they film them, they release them. And then all of a sudden, if something happens, if you have a busy week, you get sick, you get ill, you can't get a guest for that week, it creates a bit of a disruption in the flow. And one of the most important things that you need to do in order to get on a new and noteworthy is you need consistency of publication. Whether it's on iTunes or any social media platform for that matter, they really do the platforms all like consistency when it comes to publishing. And for us, we published a new one every 7 days. And we were able to do that because we had like 40 or 50 that were already recorded, and now I think, what do we release? 1 or 2 a week? One a week, so we've got plenty to shell out, and that way we can really pick and choose to release the content depending on what's happening in the market. We've got let's say we've got 40 podcasts in our bank. If there's a theme running in the market at that time, if there's a trending topic running in the market at that time, then we can actually, prioritize the content and publish the content that is actually online or along the same theme as what's going on or what's trending in the market at that time. Something else you need to consider is building the hype for the podcast. One of the things that we did, we actually started filming for our podcast in November of last year. And we actually had the hashtag secret project. And so for it was almost probably 9, 10, maybe 11 months, we built up this tension. Now it was, for the most part, it was pretty obvious that we were launching a podcast. It wasn't completely obvious, because what was interesting is every time I asked, what do you think the secret project is about? We got this whole range of different answers, but there was always a pretty fair weighting in the podcast category with people who were having a good old guess. But by doing that, we created this huge level of intrigue, which is nothing more than a combination of dopamine and norepinephrine, whereby people were, oh, what's this all about? What's this all about? So by the time we get close, that's what we call the pre-launch. The pre-launch is where you see that there's something new and something exciting coming. And the pre-launch is when you actually drop and you say, guys, we are launching a podcast. Unstoppable is coming soon. We'll be launching October 2nd on my birthday. It's going to be massive. And the pre-launch phase for us, I think it was about 9 or 10 months. The pre-launch phase for us, I think, was about maybe 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks. And then the launch phase, where we actually hit it really quite hard, I think it was about a 7 to 14 day period. 7 days, I think, really intense. And then 14 days where we started to lighten off a little bit, where we still had a few going out. And now we just, we're marketing it consistently with 1 or 2 or 3 posts per week. And that's where it comes into learning how to market the podcast is going to be really critical. So for us, one of the things that we did that really helped us leverage the marketing capabilities of the podcast is we filmed the podcast. We didn't just record the audio, we actually filmed them. As you can see from the setup here, I don't know if Matthias can swing around and show you. We've got 1, 2, and we've even got a third camera up there. We've got some lights set up. We've got good quality audio gear, but we actually recorded not just the audio, but we also recorded the video of the podcast, and we actually used the video and we repurposed the video by creating these little 15, 30 second, 60 second, 2 minute, 3 minute, 4 minute clips from the podcast, and we use those as promos, but they also became rants in their own. So, for us, the podcast is what we refer to as pillar content. And one of the things that we do with pillar content is we then carve it down. The podcast is pillar content. K-Day is pillar content. The social experiment is pillar content. Keynotes is pillar content.
Kerwin.
Hey, Kerwin is pillar content. Am I leaving anything out? That's pretty much all of our pillars. And what we do with our pillar content, for the most part, it's the longer form content. But inside that longer form content, I think from one of our podcasts, for example, I think on average we'd get from one podcast anywhere between 8 to 16. Oh, excuse me. Oh, take a little sip of coffee. 8 to 16 rants from a podcast. Now, those 8 to 16 rants for the podcast, they become independent pieces of content. Okay, that are repurposed as rants on Instagram for 60 seconds, videos on Facebook, longer form videos on YouTube, and the long form podcast itself gets published on YouTube as well, which is a good way to repurpose it. But those independent rants also in themselves serve with the right branding associated as little marketing tools, as little marketing teasers, just like a commercial, just like with anything. There's you get 30, 15, 30 and 60 second commercials for new TV programs. And we use, the rants as pretty much the same thing. We cut them into 15 second, 30 second, 45 second, 60 second, and even in some cases a few minute little rants. They become independent pieces of content which add to the content mix and the publishing schedule and the content calendar, but them in themselves become advertisements with the right branding, because you don't just put them independently as rants. You've got to have branding associated. Cut from Unstoppable, download Unstoppable, go to iTunes now, subscribe to Unstoppable, so people know we can get the rest of it. And that for us, has been a big part. And the last thing that I'll add is making sure that you ask people as a part of the strategy to go and review the podcast. Now, one of the things that we've learned from the beginning on the New and Noteworthy is you need completed video, completed listening, completed, what do you call it? I don't even know what you call it. You need someone to listen to the whole episode, because if someone listens to the first 5 seconds, it's not like a Facebook video where they count a view as 3 seconds, or a YouTube video as they count it as 3 seconds of viewing. You've got to get a entire viewing in order to really register. And so one of the things that you can get you on the New and Noteworthy is getting complete downloads and complete listens, but also reviews. And we ask our community for reviews. We did that through social media. We did that through our database. We did that through our different communities and Facebook groups as well. So if you follow that schedule, then you should have a bit of luck. So hopefully that helps. Go and podcast your ass off. That sounded a bit weird, didn't it?
A little bit weird. Ospic S8 on Instagram. What's your view on how much longer Facebook will be viable? And will there be a shift to go as it degenerates?
Look, I think that's a really interesting question. I think Facebook is going to be easily viable for another, depends on how you define viable. I think Facebook will be viable, in perpetuity for a very, very long time. But its viability is going to shift depending on the category of business that you're in, as the volume of advertisers start to shift over. Because right now there's somewhere about 70 to 76 billion in Australia, just as an example. There's about 70 to 70, let's call it $70 billion a year that's still spent on TV advertising. But the funny thing is no one's watching fucking TV. I've just done a tour around Australia where there was 4,000 people in different events that we had around Australia, and I surveyed the audience. Most of the audiences were 500, 600, 700, 800 people at a time. And whenever I asked who watches live free-to-air television, I'm not joking here. And every time I asked this, there was less than 6 people in every scenario. And when I had them, put up your hand if you watch free-to-air television, and then I said, now keep your hand up if you actually watch the ads and you don't pick up your phone and go to social media when the ads are on. More than half of them actually put their hands down. So in most cities that we went to, there was 1 or 2 people out of rooms of 600, 700, 800 people that actually watch the live free-to-air television and their commercials. The bulk of the others are watching pre-recorded content that they fast forward through the ads, or they're not even watching pre-recorded content. They're on Netflix, they're on Stan, they're on Prime Video, they're on iTunes, where there are no There is no friction in the form of ads, or even friction in the form of, because there's even even if you've got pre-recorded television, you still have to fast forward the ads. That's still friction. You still got to wait for 30 seconds while you fast forward through 1.5 to 3 minutes of advertisements, and that in itself creates its own friction. So the thing is, like, we've got $70 billion worth of ads right now. Let's just call it that, being currently put on TV, and maybe that is combined with print and radio as well. But regardless, you've got TV stations going bankrupt, you've got radio stations consolidating, you've got magazine companies that are shutting down, en masse. As soon as these bright-eyed and bushy-tailed CEOs and marketing managers and marketing, chief marketing officers from these mega organisations start to wake up and realize money's not being spent on, people aren't listening to as much commercial radio. People aren't watching commercial television. Once people start to tune into this and realize to this, there's going to be an enormous amount of money and budgets that's going to shift over to Facebook ads. It's going to shift over to Instagram ads. And when that happens, when that shift happens, it is going to price almost every motherfucker out of the market, and that's going to be a massive shift, because right now there's 60 million active business pages on Facebook. 60 million. That's not even a lot when you consider the amount of businesses on the planet. But there's only 6% of those that actually pay for advertising, so it's only a very small fraction. So right now, Facebook is underpriced, but it's getting more expensive every day. The reason it's getting more expensive every day is because these guys in these major corporations are starting to realize they're not getting bang for their buck on their TV ads. Okay, and as a result, they're shifting the money over to platforms where they're going to get a little bit more bang, or a lot more bang for the buck, and that's going to make the advertising more expensive. I often think about the golden ages of Google AdWords. 2003, I loved Google AdWords. I was paying 3 to 5 cents a click. My acquisition cost per lead was around 60 cents all day long. Just give the money to AdWords, they give you leads back, you turn those leads into sales, happy days. Now, those bids for those same keywords are $65, $75 plus, and my average cost per lead is $220. And I don't advertise on Google AdWords anymore. Why? Because all the major corporates got on board, all the bigger businesses got on board, and they bid those keywords up to the point where, to me, for $240, no kidding, for $240, I can actually probably get about 100 leads off Facebook. So for me, it's just like, it's an absolute no-brainer. And so for right now, Facebook is incredibly viable. It is going to continue to be incredibly viable. I'm going to give it a viability window of about 3 to 5 years before we start to see major shifts, maybe even sooner. We're seeing major shifts now. I was just talking to a business just this morning who's gone from a 7-to-1 return. For every dollar that they invest, they get a $7 return, to now they're getting, for every dollar that they invest, they're now getting a 1.3, 1.4 return. Because there's been some changes as a result of the data leaks and data analytica and all that jazz. Facebook is making it a lot harder to target people, which in itself is presenting its own problems for advertisers, because we're not able to target as effectively, and as a result, we're pulling people into the advertising target process that is making the penetration a lot harder to cut through, which is now making it which, by the way, is indicating the importance of creating audiences. Because the cool thing is, although the targeting features might be becoming more restricted on Facebook, the cool thing is audiences aren't. You can actually now build your own audiences, and through the use of content, and this is one of the things I love about video. Publish video. People who watch the video, and especially if they're watching 30, 40, 50% of that video, they're interested in that content. You can even target them with more video, and if they watch that video, that proves that they're more actually genuinely interested in that content. You retarget the same person with 5 different videos all around the same thing, you're going to end up with this very high qualified, very warm audience that you can then start marketing to. So the targeting features might be becoming a little bit more restricted, but the ability to build audiences is going to be where it's at. And for me, that's where the magic is. That's where the money is. So viability right now, it's still very viable, but you've got to know how to use the platform. But ultimately, the people who understand the importance, and this is where most people fall down with Facebook. Most people are relying purely on a paid advertising strategy with Facebook, and that's just it's only going to get you so far. The real value in Facebook is when you actually get a really strong organic content strategy. You combine that with a really solid targeted audience strategy, ad strategy, and you bring those two together, you get magic, and you're able to make lots of money. But the thing is, most people are too lazy. They just want to do ads. Oh, I just want to place an ad. They're too lazy to produce content, and that's why the people who produce content are the ones that are going to win. So just fucking produce content. Easy as, bro.
Let's go to Cathablet27. How do you make yourself irreplaceable in the workplace?
How do you make yourself irreplaceable in the workplace? That is a very dangerous question. You see, this is a catch-22. If you become irreplaceable in a workplace, you become a liability. Because there's this little thing called key person risk. I hate it when any one individual in my organization becomes irreplaceable or has too much power, because then if you lose them, you're f***ed. And the challenge for a business owner, or let me put it this way, the real value is not in becoming irreplaceable. The real value is finding the right organization that sees the value in your ability to be able to duplicate yourself and move into the next thing. You see, a lot of people think, well, if I make myself irreplaceable, they'll never get rid of me and they'll have to, they'll always need me. Yeah, that's called codependence. Okay, that's not a healthy form of connection, nor is that a healthy form of commerce. Now, I know I'm going to get a lot of people, or some people that are probably going to push back at this and say, well, Kerwin, if I am able to duplicate myself, then they could get rid of me and replace me with someone at half the cost. That's where the first part of the equation comes in. You've got to find the right organization to align yourself with, who sees the value in the ability to duplicate yourself. See, right now for me, I see we've got a massive risk in our business right now where we've only got a couple of really key salespeople, one in particular. And the challenge is there's an enormous amount of resistance in some of these people to duplicate themselves for whatever reason. But let's just say that they feel if they duplicate themselves, then they may no longer have leverage. They may no longer have the ability to be seen as the best or the greatest in their field. But the challenge is that in itself becomes a liability for the business. And so you don't start looking at these people as great performers. You start looking at them as risks. Okay, and when you've got a risk in the business, what do? You have to mitigate that risk. And the way that you mitigate that risk is by trying to find ways to build up other people around them so that you can remove that risk. And that in itself can come with its own inherent set of problems, okay? Because people start to feel threatened, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not that we're having those issues, but that's the situation that we experience right now, that many businesses experience when they have one or two people that operate in key roles, especially in sales. They become really good at what they do, and in some cases, they become irreplaceable. Now, if you become irreplaceable in a business and you're toxic, then you're an absolute nightmare for a business. And one of the things that I suggest to business owners, if you have someone that is irreplaceable in your business and they are toxic, get rid of them immediately. Because the toxicity by virtue of the consequence in the culture is going to cost you a lot more, okay, than what that person will be able to bring in by the value of their role. Now, at first you might be thinking, but they bring in this much revenue. But you've also got to be understanding what is the consequence of that revenue? What is the consequence now of the energy, of the culture, of the destructive behaviors? So for me, I actually think it's and again, I hope this is taken with good measure of equal parts sugar and equal parts salt. That becoming irreplaceable in a business, to me, it's broken psychology, because it's coming from a place of lack. It's not coming from a place of abundance. It's coming from this perception that if you become irreplaceable, then you'll be able to demand more or get more money. And in some cases that might be true, but you've got to understand the long-term consequences of that. Is if anyone in this organization becomes irreplaceable, then that, to me, they become a key person risk. And what do you do when you have a risk? You look to mitigate it. And sometimes that mitigation might be through replacement. Okay, and it might take 1, 2, 3 years to replace that person, but if that person becomes a risk, there's got to be an exit strategy. There's got to be a plan B. Otherwise, if that person leaves and all the business is dependent on them, the whole business can go to shit. And that means that all the employees lose their jobs. Everyone else, all the customers, everything else don't get service anymore. And that is a risk that is unacceptable for any business. So my advice is, rather than becoming irreplaceable in a business, find a way that adds so much value, okay, in so many different ways that people won't want to get rid of you, and do it from a place of an abundance where you learn how to go into different roles and be able to replace yourself or duplicate yourself so you can add even more value. Because imagine if you're a cracking salesperson, right, and you become what you perceive as irreplaceable. Okay, yes, you will be worth a lot of money, but imagine if you could duplicate that into 12 different people. Imagine how fucking valuable you would be then. Oh, but what if then they don't need me, they can get rid of me and they've still got those other 11 people? That's lack mentality. Okay, the abundant mentality knows that if you do that with the right people, align with the right values, you say, well, I'm not doing with the right people, then find the right fucking people. Okay, but coming from a place of lack where you become irreplaceable, as I said, I stand by my initial argument. That's codependence, where you want someone to become dependent on you, addicted to you, and that's not a healthy relationship. Okay, there's no choice in that. That's unhealthy. Find a way to add so much value in such an ethical and integral way that people would never want to get rid of you. Not because they can't bear to lose you, but because they don't want to. There's a difference between someone not being able to becoming irreplaceable, okay, because they need you, and which is completely in contrast to someone wanting to working with you and having you stick around because they want to work with you. Imagine being in imagine this. Imagine being in a relationship where you can't leave because you fundamentally need that person. What kind of an energy would that create in that environment? You're not there because you want to be there. You're there because you're afraid of losing. Okay, you're addicted to some kind of chemical response, chemical reaction, or environmental stimulus. Okay, you're not there because you want to. You're there because you need to be there. Okay, versus imagine being in a relationship because you want to be there. And imagine knowing that the person that you're with is only with you because they want to be there, not because they need to be with you. That is a completely different form of relationship. Think about that.
Powerful. That's the episode.
That is episode 43 of the Hey Kerwin Show. Hashtag Hey Kerwin. Ask any question you want, anywhere, anyhow, anytime. Question of the day. What is your favorite podcast that you listen to right now? Unstoppable. What is the most important, powerful, potentially life-changing podcast that you listen to right now? I'm actually genuinely curious to know. I'm interested in finding a new one. Let me know. Hashtag Hey Kerwin. Let me know your questions. Say hi to your mum for me. Till next time.